the first time someone asked her about children. She smiled. That's what I remember most. Not the question, the smile. Small, polite, painfully practiced. We were standing outside after church while people gathered near the wagons talking quietly in the afternoon sun. Children ran through the grass laughing somewhere nearby. Women carried dishes between houses. Men spoke softly near the fence. Everything looked peaceful. But then another woman leaned closer to her and asked the question almost every married Amish woman eventually hears. So, when do you think the Lord will bless you with children? The moment lasted only a few seconds, but I still remember the way her eyes changed afterward. Just slightly. A sadness so small most people would never notice it. But once you've seen hidden pain before, you recognize it immediately. At the time, I didn't fully understand why that moment stayed with me. Years later, I finally did.
Because in many Amish communities, motherhood isn't treated like one possible path for women. It's often treated like the path. And when a woman cannot have children, the silence surrounding that pain can become overwhelming. I didn't understand it then. But emotional suffering becomes heavier when people expect you to carry it quietly. That was the first thing that unsettled me, not the question itself. How normal the question sounded to everybody else. Because nobody intended cruelty. That's what made it more painful. Most people genuinely believed they were being kind, interested, supportive. But repeated questions slowly become emotional wounds when someone already feels broken inside. I remember watching her over the next several months. At every gathering, someone eventually asked again, "Any news yet? Have you thought of seeing another doctor? Maybe God is waiting for the right time." Always polite, always smiling, and every time, she smiled back. But her smile became smaller each time. That's when something started to feel off. Not because people were intentionally unkind, because I realized nobody truly understood the emotional loneliness she was carrying. Inside many Amish communities, children are deeply connected to identity, family life, faith, womanhood, purpose. So when pregnancy doesn't happen, many women quietly begin questioning themselves emotionally. Not publicly, internally. That's the dangerous part. The silence. Because silence gives shame room to grow. I remember sitting beside her one evening while we folded laundry together. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The room smelled like clean fabric and candle wax. For nearly an hour, we barely spoke. Then suddenly, very quietly, she asked me something. "Do you think women without children disappoint people?" I looked at her immediately, because the sadness in her voice frightened me. Not dramatic sadness, exhausted sadness. The kind people carry after feeling emotionally alone for too long. And before I could answer, she whispered something I never forgot. "I feel invisible around mothers." That sentence stayed inside me for years, because suddenly, I understood the loneliness nobody openly talked about. Not physical loneliness, emotional loneliness. The feeling of standing inside a life everyone else seems to understand naturally, while secretly feeling left behind. At the time, I told myself this was normal sadness, but deep inside, something resisted that explanation. Because grief becomes heavier when people expect you to hide it politely. And many women did exactly that. They smiled, cooked meals, attended gatherings, helped raise other people's children, while privately wondering if they had failed somehow. That realization broke my heart later in life, because infertility doesn't just affect the body, it affects identity, self-worth, belonging. Especially inside communities where motherhood carries enormous emotional meaning. I didn't understand it then, but silence shapes pain long before people recognize it happening. It teaches people which struggles deserve comfort and which struggles should stay hidden quietly. One older woman admitted something heartbreaking to me years later. We were sitting outside after supper, watching the sun disappear behind the fields, and softly, she said, "Women without children often spend years pretending they're okay." Then she paused and added, "Because eventually, people stop asking how you feel." That sentence stayed with me longer than almost anything else, because it explained something painful. People often know how to celebrate motherhood, but many don't know how to sit beside grief that has no easy solution. So silence slowly replaces honesty. And silence can make suffering feel even lonelier. Night after night, many women carried those emotions privately. And every morning, they continued pretending strength for everyone around them. That was the hardest part, the pretending. Because once someone believes their pain burdens others, they stop speaking honestly about it. And eventually, they stop asking for comfort too. That emotional isolation changes people deeply, especially women already questioning their worth privately. I remember hearing another woman whisper something during a church gathering once. She said, "People treat childless women like unfinished stories." I still think about those words sometimes, because they reveal something painful about expectation. Not all pressure is loud. Some pressure exists quietly inside looks, inside questions, inside assumptions repeated over and over for years. And eventually, many women begin carrying shame that never truly belonged to them. That's what frightened me most later in life. Not the sadness itself. How normal the sadness had become. I didn't understand it then. But communities sometimes confuse silence with strength. They believe enduring pain quietly proves faith. But emotional suffering carried alone for too long changes people. Slowly, quietly, deeply. Looking back now, I don't think the hardest part for many women was infertility itself. I think the hardest part was feeling emotionally unseen afterward. That's what loneliness really is sometimes. Not being physically alone. Feeling invisible while surrounded by people. That understanding took me years of slowly learning words I never had growing up. Grief, shame, isolation, emotional exhaustion, people-pleasing, things many women experience deeply, without knowing how to describe them. And once you finally have language for your pain, your entire past begins making sense differently. Not perfectly, but honestly. Looking back now, I think many women didn't need advice nearly as much as they needed emotional understanding. Someone willing to say, "This must hurt," without trying to fix it immediately, without turning away, without hiding inside silence. Because sometimes healing begins the moment someone finally feels emotionally seen. If you're still listening, maybe part of this story feels familiar to you too. Maybe you've experienced seasons where everyone expected strength from you, while privately you felt exhausted inside. If you have, you're not weak, and you're not alone. That's something I wish more women heard earlier. Some things stay with you, not as memories, but as emotional habits your body learns long before your mind fully understands them. And maybe that's the part nobody talks about enough, not infertility itself, but the emotional silence surrounding it. And maybe, speaking honestly about it now, is the first step toward finally breaking that silence. If this story connected with you, leave a comment below. Sometimes hearing me too helps people feel human again, and if you want more honest stories people usually stay silent about, subscribe, because maybe these conversations matter more than we realize.